She hesitated at the clinic's entrance, her heart pounding as though it wanted to escape her chest. The fluorescent lights above cast a sterile glow on the polished floors, and the soft hum of the air conditioning did little to calm her nerves. She had delayed this visit for months, telling herself she would go tomorrow, but tomorrow had never arrived. Today, however, there was no escaping it. She tugged nervously at the straps of her bag, her fingers twisting them in anxious loops as she tried to steady her breathing. Every step she took toward the reception desk felt heavy, weighted by a mixture of embarrassment and fear. She was painfully aware of how personal this visit was, the kind of appointment that left her feeling exposed even before she met the doctor. Her eyes darted around the waiting area, noting the array of magazines neatly stacked on a table, and the distant sound of footsteps echoing through the corridor. Despite the clinic's attempt to create a calming environment with soft colors and minimalistic decor, she couldn't shake the tight knot of anxiety in her stomach. She wanted to disappear, to blend into the walls, to become invisible. Her hands, clammy and trembling, gripped her bag as if it were a shield. She tried to focus on something mundane, the patterned carpet, the glass doors at the far end of the room, but every small noise, every cough or shuffle, seemed amplified, making her jumpy. When her name was finally called, she felt a sudden rush of panic. The syllables of her own name, spoken clearly and professionally by the nurse, echoed unnaturally in her ears. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to rise from the chair, her legs feeling unsteady under her weight. The nurse offered a warm, reassuring smile, but even that small gesture did little to calm the storm inside her. She nodded almost mechanically, her mind racing with thoughts of what was to come. With slow, deliberate steps, she followed the nurse down the corridor, past walls adorned with calming art and softly buzzing lights. As the door to the consultation room came into view, her pulse quickened. This was it. She paused for a fraction of a second, taking a deep breath in an attempt to muster courage she wasn't sure she possessed. The door opened, and the smell of antiseptic and cleanliness filled her senses, sharp but not unpleasant. The room itself was pristine, modern, and orderly, with neatly arranged instruments and a large, well-lit examination table at its center. She could feel her palms growing sweatier as she stepped inside, the small, enclosed space intensifying her awareness of her own vulnerability. Sitting down on the edge of the examination table, she folded her hands tightly in her lap, keeping her gaze low to avoid eye contact with anyone. Her mind was a jumble of questions, doubts, and worries, yet amid all of it, a small, stubborn spark of determination reminded her that she had made it this far and that this visit, though terrifying, was necessary. Even as she tried to calm herself, her heart continued to race. She was acutely aware of every sound, the soft click of the door closing behind her, the subtle rustle of the nurse stepping out, the faint whir of equipment in the corner. It was a strange, almost surreal mix of fear and anticipation, a moment suspended between hesitation and inevitability. And though she tried to steady her breathing, to force her mind away from the embarrassment she felt, she couldn't help the tiny, nervous smile that betrayed just how human she was in that quiet, sterile room, alone with her thoughts and the unknown that waited just beyond the door. The door swung open, and she froze mid. Standing there was a man, impossibly young for a doctor, yet exuding a presence that immediately commanded attention. He was tall and impeccably groomed, his dark hair perfectly styled, his crisp white coat hanging effortlessly over a tailored suit beneath. There was a confidence in the way he carried himself, a quiet assurance that suggested he was used to more than just a medical practice. He seemed like someone who belonged in boardrooms and high-rise offices as easily as he did in a clinic. She couldn't help but notice the subtle warmth in his eyes, the kind of calm attentiveness that immediately put her on edge, and yet somehow made her heart flutter. "Good morning," he said, his voice smooth, clear, and comforting. "I'm Dr. Amir Khan. How are you feeling today?" There was a gentle smile playing on his lips, one that seemed perfectly measured to put patients at ease. She nodded quickly, trying to steady her racing heart, but words refused to form. Her throat felt tight, as if her nervousness had caught itself in a physical vice. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click, and she became hyper-aware of the sound, of the small space, of the way his presence seemed to fill the room. He began the consultation in a professional, reassuring tone, explaining the procedure she had come for. His explanations were clear, precise, and surprisingly patient, as though he anticipated every question before it even escaped her lips. The way he spoke, calm, articulate, and respectful, slowly began to ease the tension that had been coiling in her chest for weeks. She found herself listening more than she had ever expected, her eyes cautiously flicking up to meet his, drawn to the sincerity in his gaze. There was something disarmingly familiar about him, something that made her pause. She couldn't quite place it, but there was a sense that she had seen this face somewhere before, though where exactly remained frustratingly out of reach. As he continued, she noticed small details: the subtle designer watch peeking from under his cuff, the faint hint of a cologne that was neither overpowering nor ordinary, the perfect posture that suggested both discipline and privilege. Slowly, realization began to prick at the edges of her consciousness. This was no ordinary doctor. There was an unmistakable aura of someone who had wealth, influence, and experience beyond the sterile walls of this room. Her curiosity mingled with anxiety, and a blush rose unbidden to her cheeks as she struggled to maintain her composure. Despite the initial shock, there was something strangely comforting about him. He moved with purpose, but without rushing, asking questions that were professional, yet thoughtful, listening to her responses with genuine attention. Each small reassurance, each carefully chosen word, chipped away at the wall of fear and embarrassment she had built around herself. Yet, even as she began to relax, the undercurrent of astonishment lingered. She couldn't stop noticing the contrast between the humble purpose of the visita routine, awkward checkup, and the man who was handling it with the poise and presence of someone who clearly operated in a world far beyond her own. By the time he asked her to prepare for the examination, her nerves had settled just enough to allow her to breathe more evenly. Still, a flicker of wonder remained in her chest, mingled with a tension that was no longer entirely anxiety. Something about Dr. Amir Khan was unusual, intriguing, almost magnetic, and she realized with a fluttering mix of fear and excitement that this visit might not be as ordinary as she had once believed. The examination began with careful professionalism, and she forced herself to focus on the routine rather than her spiraling thoughts. Dr. Amir Khan moved with deliberate precision, explaining each step of the process, his voice a steady anchor amid her nervous fluttering. His demeanor was warm, attentive, and remarkably unassuming. Yet there was an unmistakable elegance in the way he handled every detail, from adjusting the examination table to making sure she felt comfortable. She could feel herself relaxing, in small increments, the tension in her shoulders easing as his calm presence slowly worked its quiet magic. As the examination progressed, their conversation turned to lighter topics, a deliberate attempt on his part to ease her anxiety. He asked about her studies, her hobbies, and the little victories she cherished in her day-to-day life. She found herself responding in a more open, candid manner than she had intended, the nervous walls around her beginning to crumble under the gentle weight of his interest. Then, almost inadvertently, she mentioned a charity initiative she had read about, a project aimed at providing medical care to underprivileged children. Her words tumbled out in a rush, her voice betraying a mix of excitement and admiration. At the mention of the charity, Dr. Amir's expression shifted subtly. His eyebrows arched slightly, and a faint, knowing smile tugged at the corners of his lips. There was a glimmer of recognition in his eyes, a spark that seemed to light up behind his professional calm. She noticed it immediately and felt her stomach clench in a combination of curiosity and unease. Something about his reaction felt personal, intimate, and unnervingly familiar, as though the words she had spoken had unlocked a door she hadn't realized existed. The realization struck her gradually, like the slow dawn breaking over a quiet city. She began to connect the pieces, the polished confidence, the effortless charm, the subtle hints of wealth in his demeanor. Her mind raced as she recalled articles she had stumbled upon online, mentions of a young philanthropist who had amassed a fortune before the age of 30 and was quietly involved in countless charitable initiatives. The picture crystallized, and her heart skipped a beat. The doctor examining her, the man whose calm voice had been guiding her through this intimate, vulnerable moment, was none other than that young millionaire she had read about. Embarrassment and shock collided in her chest, making her cheeks burn. She felt exposed in ways that went beyond the physical. The knowledge that she was sitting before someone so accomplished, so untouchably wealthy, made her words falter and her posture stiffen. Yet Dr. Amir noticed her hesitation and the flush creeping up her neck. Instead of exploiting it or making her feel foolish, He simply smiled with gentle amusement, his eyes warm and understanding. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a quiet acknowledgement of the human surprise that had overtaken her. For a few moments, the room held a delicate tension, a mix of professional intimacy and personal astonishment. Her mind buzzed with questions, wonder, and disbelief. While he continued his work with seamless competence, neither rushed nor intrusive. The ordinary nature of the visit had transformed into something extraordinary, an encounter that defied her expectations and left her reeling with the improbable reality of who this man really was. She realized, with a strange mix of humility and fascination, that this appointment had become far more than a routine checkup. It had become a moment she would never forget. After the examination, she sat back slightly, trying to collect herself. The initial shock of discovering Dr. Amir Khan's identity had left her reeling, but now a different feeling was beginning to take shape, a mix of curiosity, admiration, and a subtle thrill she hadn't expected. He moved around the room with the same calm professionalism as before, but now she noticed nuances she hadn't fully registered. The faint sparkle in his eyes when he listened, the way he tilted his head slightly when intrigued by something. She said, the effortless ease with which he balanced authority and approachability. Every small gesture was precise, yet human, commanding attention without demanding it. He handed her a folder containing her results, explaining each detail clearly, ensuring she understood without feeling overwhelmed. His explanations were patient, meticulous, and reassuring. But it wasn't just his skill that captivated her, it was the way he made her feel safe. Despite the awkwardness of the situation, there was no condescension, no pretense. He treated her as an equal, even while she was acutely aware of the chasm between their worlds. She found herself listening closely, absorbing not just the medical advice but the tone, the subtle warmth, the way he framed his words as both professional guidance and gentle conversation. Then, almost casually, he teased her lightly about her wide-eyed reaction earlier. You looked like you had just seen a ghost when I mentioned a charity, he said with a knowing smile, his voice carrying a lightness that made her cheeks warm. She stammered, struggling for words, a blush creeping across her face. I wasn't expecting. Her sentences faltered, but he simply chuckled softly, a sound that was unexpectedly comforting rather than patronizing. For the first time since entering the clinic, she allowed herself a genuine laugh, small but sincere, shaking off some of the lingering tension. She realized that the man who could have intimidated her, who could have made her feel small with a single word, had instead created a space where she could feel both vulnerable and accepted. There was an unusual ease to their interaction now, a silent understanding that bridged the gap between her nervousness and his composed demeanor. The conversation meandered naturally, moving beyond medicine into shared interests and light, personal stories. He asked about her life outside the clinic, about dreams she hadn't voiced to anyone, and she answered, surprised at how willingly. She opened up. In turn, he shared small anecdotes about his own experiences, carefully chosen to entertain without overwhelming, to reveal just enough of his world to intrigue her but not intimidate. It was a delicate dance of disclosure and curiosity, and she found herself caught in it, drawn to the humanity behind the millionaire facade. By the time she prepared to leave, there was a lingering sense of connection, subtle yet undeniable. What had begun as a routine, awkward medical visit had transformed into an encounter charged with fascination and warmth. She realized, with a quiet thrill, that she had not only confronted her own shyness, but had experienced a glimpse of someone extraordinary, someone who combined wealth, intelligence, and compassion in ways she had never imagined. As she stood to leave, she noticed the faint smile in his eyes, the unspoken acknowledgement of their shared moment, and felt a small, fluttering anticipation of what might come next. An unexpected story had begun today, and she was already hooked. She stepped out of the examination room, her pulse still a little faster than normal, her mind buzzing with the improbable reality of what had just happened. The clinic's bright, neutral hallways seemed almost surreal now, as if the ordinary world outside could never quite contain the extraordinary encounter she had experienced. She clutched the folder of her results a little tighter, though the documents themselves felt secondary to the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions swirling inside her. Each step toward the exit was measured, her feet moving with a strange mix of hesitancy and anticipation, as if part of her wanted to linger, to prolong the moment she had just lived. As she approached the door, Dr. Amir Khan appeared in the doorway, his presence calm and poised, yet somehow charged with a quiet energy that made her stomach flutter. "Take care of yourself," he said softly, a tone that was both professional and personally attentive. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added lightly, "And if you ever need advice beyond medicine, don't hesitate to reach out." There was a pause before she could respond, a suspended moment in which the words sank in. She blinked, momentarily speechless, caught between disbelief and curiosity. The casual phrasing, the subtle suggestion of continued connection, made her cheeks warm and her heart skip an extra beat. She managed a small, shy smile, fumbling over a reply. I'll remember that," she murmured, her voice quieter than she intended. There was a strange thrill in the simple exchange, a recognition that this wasn't just an ordinary farewell. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to look at him fully, taking in the young, confident figure who had transformed a routine medical visit into something far more remarkable. He gave her a brief nod, his expression reassuring yet tinged with a quiet amusement, and stepped aside to let her leave. Outside, the sunlight hit her face, warm and almost blinding after the cool sterility of the clinic. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs, and felt a wave of exhilaration mingling with lingering nerves. The ordinary world seemed suddenly different, somehow more vibrant, more charged with possibility. She realized that, today, she had faced more than just a medical appointment. She had confronted her own shyness, navigated the unexpected presence of someone extraordinary, and felt a connection she hadn't anticipated. The encounter left her with a sense of awe, a subtle sense of wonder at the unpredictable turns life could take. As she walked down the sidewalk, the city noises a gentle background hum. Her mind replayed fragments of their conversation. The warmth in his voice, the subtle humor in his smile, the ease with which he had made her feel seen and respected despite her nerves. She found herself thinking not only about who he was, young millionaire with intelligence, skill, and charm, but also about the way he had treated her, with kindness, patience, and humanity. It was a combination that left her both fascinated and inspired, an imprint that lingered long after she left the clinic behind. By the time she reached her destination, she understood that something significant had begun, a story that extended beyond the walls of the clinic. The shy girl, who had entered feeling anxious and uncertain, had walked away with a spark of confidence, a newfound sense of curiosity about the world, and the realization that extraordinary people and extraordinary moments could appear in the most unexpected places. Her heart carried a quiet anticipation, a gentle excitement that this encounter might be only the beginning of a journey she could never have imagined, one that had started in the most unlikely of ways.